pleased to have an opportunity to hear a conversation between WonKyoung Choi and Dr. Paul Banahene Adjei, reflecting on the diversity of our community and church. WonKyoung is a PhD candidate of the Department of Anthropology of Memorial University. She is studying Korean migrants' identity and various thoughts about languages based on their migration experiences. She came to Newfoundland with her husband in 2012, and she's been attending Bethesda with her husband and son since 2016. Dr. Paul is an associate professor and the interim dean of the School of Social Work at Memorial University. He was born and raised in Ghana and migrated to Canada in 2013 to pursue his master and PhD at the University of Toronto. He has been married to Martha for the last 19 years. They both relocated to St. John's in 2013 and have since become members of Bethesda. Let's give both WonKyoung and Dr. Paul a very warm welcome.
Good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
Yeah. Well, as we celebrate diversity today, let's take a moment to think about the value that diversity brings to our community and our life. As far as I know, diversity, for me, diversity means respect the difference, respect the uniqueness of others. So in this sense, I was very pleased when I get a small stickers from Bethesda that come as you are. It was so precious moment that I read that moment. And how do you think about the value of diversity?
Thank you very much. A wise person once says that everybody is Canadian, except that they still haven't found their place home yet. It speaks about the richness and the value of what being Canadian really means. Pastor Bruce earlier on mentioned for the metaphor of Canada, we call it a mosaic. Mosaic means that people of different background, different cultural background and color can come into this country and still have a place for them. So for me, when we talk about multiculturalism, it is a reminder of our unique differences as a nation and what has made us strong. For some people, they see differences as something negative to be avoided. But, studies have shown that there is a lot of strength in diversity and differences. And that if we know how to harness those differences, it can help, bring a rich, society. So for me, when we talk about multiculturalism, is the genuine recognition that we can be different but still be the same. I look at it as a metaphor of a forest. We say that when you look at a forest from a distance, all the trees form the same canopy. But when you get closer, you realize that each tree sits differently or stand differently. And for me, that is the uniqueness of our society as Canadian. At a distance, we are all one. But when we get closer, we are different. And our differences do not necessarily mean negative, but it is what makes us strong.
That's great. I understand from your metaphor of forest. The differences and the uniqueness can inspire us in our everyday life. Well, we see that diversity opens the door to unfamiliar society. What are some of the common concerns that makes this challenging for a newcomer to achieve?
Thank you very much. Being a newcomer in this society is inspiring, but it's also very challenging. There are a lot of challenges that many of us as newcomers encounter in this society. We encounter everyday racism in a very subtle way that sometimes it comes to you as a surprise. There are also racism that comes at you in a very blatant way. And I think that given that we are in the house of God, it's very important that we take inspiration from the Word of God. And here I am making reference to an incident that happened in Galatians chapter 2, verse 11 downwards. And it was an encounter between Paul and Peter. And Paul called out Peter in what he perceived as hypocrisy on the part of Peter. Because when Peter, reached that Galatian community and saw people who were different, initially he was treating them as the same. But then when he saw other members from his own community coming closer, then he decided to treat them differently. And Paul called out Peter for being hypocrite. For me, the lesson that we can glean from this is that many a times, being a Christians and being in the same house of God, there's a tendency for us to think that we are incapable of discriminating against others. But we have potential of doing that. And so for newcomers, we face a lot of challenges. Sometimes there is a sense that you are part of the community, but you are still an outsider. It's like being invited to a family Thanksgiving dinner and realize that there is no chair for you. And sometimes that is how many of us as newcomers we feel. We know we are part of a community, but at the same time, we feel like we are being treated as an outsider.
Thank you so much. Well, for the newcomers, newcomer means to someone who migrate from somewhere to the other place. And the migration itself, I understand, is a process to find a place to belong. How do you think about those kind of belonging?
There's a saying that has been attributed to a Roman soldier, hundreds of years ago. It goes like this: home is where the heart is. And for many of us as newcomer, when we leave our original homes, sometimes the process of living is not an easy experience. Some of us were forced to run from our homes. Others also came here willingly. But whether we came here willingly or we were forced to leave, there is a burning desire to find a place that we can claim to be our own. And the process and the sense of belonging to a place itself is a journey of its own. And it requires the collective support of others to be able to make you feel home. So one of the things that we talk so much about in Newfoundland is the idea that we are a hospitable community. And there is no doubt about that. I mean, we talk a lot about Newfoundland hospitality. But sometimes you feel like the hospitality has, it goes to a certain extent and it stops. And so for many of us, I will give you an example. The first time that I became a member of this church, it was Brother Ralph that invited me and my family to his house. I can't tell you how much I appreciated that. But I am giving this as an example because oftentimes we talk about international, this is an international church. But I think that for us to build that community of making people feel they belong, I think that, there is also a responsibility on the local community to also reach out to to international or newcomers. The idea that we should reach out, for newcomers, it's always difficult to reach out to a local person. And sometimes we have help, we have needs, there are things that we are facing. We have international, newcomers that are struggling even in terms of where they are living. They are being asked to pay rent in places that are not even fit for human beings to live. They don't know their rights. And sometimes we got to know about some of this information very late. And so the idea of bringing, building a community of belongingness is a collective effort. And this is where we see the important role as the church community could also play in reaching out to newcomers and helping them to understand the settlement and the integration process in this community.
Thank you so much for your insight. Lastly, I'd like to ask about the role of our church community. As a church, what can we be doing to make sure that people feel invited to belong and find opportunity to thrive?
Thank you. There are, I've already cited some of them, but for a start, we can do what Paul did. When he witnessed something that he felt it was an unfair treatment of others, he called Peter out. Imagine Paul calling Peter out. It took a lot of courage. And I think that one way we can also build that community of belongingness is always being ready to speak out. Martin Luther King said that at the end, we will remember not the evil things that our enemy did to us, but the silence of our friends. And so I think that part of what we could do as a collective, as a church body, is also to ensure that we also become the voice to speak in support of our newcomers. We must also reach out to newcomers, ask people, what can I do to really support, in your settlement here? Occasionally inviting somebody, to your home for a dinner or for, just a coffee could make a big difference, because people will not open up to you if you don't reach out to them. So these are a few things. And also share information. Information is so vital in this society. In fact, Ontario has put it on their driving plate. It says, Ontario, yours to discover. And so information is so important in this society. People knowing their rights, knowing where to go when they need help, are all those vital things that could be shared to help, in making sure that people feel a sense of belonging in this society.
Thank you so much. Well, your suggestion, like invitation, give an invitation to others to invite to supper or even though with a cup of coffee, reminds me that the John chapter 4, when Jesus met the Samaritan woman, I think that moment is break down the walls between different nations. And God's love, God created, intensely diverse, and He loves everything. And when Jesus broke that moment, I think He shows how we think about, how we deal with the difference as a child of God. And I really appreciate your insight and your stories and your talking today. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you for the opportunity.